Hello. I wanted to talk a bit about the future of RTS and some of my frustrations with the genre. This seemed like a fitting topic given everything that's gone on recently. Now, take what I have to say here with a bit of a grain of salt, but everything I'm going to say is my personal opinion, and I know it's one that a lot of people might disagree with. But I've been following the RTS scene for a while now, and I've got some thoughts about the direction the genre's going in, and I figured I'd share some of them just because, I don't know, I feel like I haven't exactly seen this specific take. Um, so, I've always been interested in RTS. As a kid, I played Red Alert 2 on my laptop a bunch, and some of my friends would occasionally run some friendly battles with StarCraft 2. And at some point, I decided to try and see, how far I could go on the StarCraft 2 ladder, and I got to around maybe like mid plat on NA. It's not terrible, but it's not that good either. And I chose this as my next video topic because I saw some news regarding a potential sequel to StarCraft, and one that, well, isn't an RTS. I think they said a third-person shooter or something along those lines. And as well as StarCraft being removed from the EWC. So I don't think a sequel is that bad anyways. Like I mean I really like the StarCraft universe. I'd be very excited for, a third person shooter in StarCraft. I think that'd be really cool. But my worry with that and why I decided to make this is that in a way that basically just means that Blizzard has just told the players that RTS is not a viable game genre to market. The fact that StarCraft 3 won't be an RTS. And this is something I've seen played out over basically the entire gaming industry. And new RTS is just, it's hard to come by. And when one is made, it's usually very derivative of StarCraft 2 or it's just bad. So, StarCraft 2, since that's where I've spent most of my RTS experience, I've played a lot of other ones, but for the most part, StarCraft 2 is the one that basically founded esports. It's basically the greatest RTS ever made. And whenever new RTSs get made, they try their best to be better at StarCraft than StarCraft. And I don't think it ever really works. They're competing with StarCraft, and it's just not as good. Stormgate was one people were very hyped for, and that one failed for, well, it failed for a lot of reasons. But I never got into it because I felt like I was just playing an imitation of StarCraft that wasn't as good. And along with the gameplay feeling just, I don't know, okay, the campaign wasn't anything to really write home about either. And I don't know, that kind of soured me on the game very quickly. Now, the newest upcoming game is going to be Zero Space, and I know this one's been, anticipated for a while now. And I mean, I played the playtest, and I had a lot of fun with it actually. And it still has a lot of StarCraft's bones, but it definitely tries to be its own thing. I think it goes in its own direction, and I respect that. And it also seems to have a lot of care in, more varied modes than just PvP. So I don't know. I'm curious how that goes, and I hope it's good. I mean, from the playtest I done, it was pretty solid. So I can only hope that Zero Space is gonna be, a good competitor. We'll see. RTS is a wide genre. It seems very narrow at first, but when you start to look at some of the stranger examples within the RTS genre, you start to see that it's actually a very varied genre. The gameplay style is very fun, and it can be played out in so many ways. Now, a good example of a similar RTS, but one that still goes in its very own direction, is Beyond All Reason. It's much more focused on macro scale battles with also a lot of multiplayer play where you have a ton of people on each team, so you have extremely grand battles, and I think that does alleviate some of the issues I have with StarCraft and friendly battles where you can play all in the same team and it's a lot of fun. But it definitely does have a learning curve, and I mean, if you're willing to, learn it, it is a great game, but it has a bit of a curve there to pick it up. I also wanted to highlight just a particular outlier in my recent looking
Metal
through
extractor
different
lost.
RTSs, and that's Kenshi. Now, Kenshi is kind of a funny game. It's without a doubt an RPG, all right? And it's also very clearly an RTS by design. It's undeniable. And it's probably the first non-competitive, purely single-player RTS I've played, and I love it. It's definitely not for everybody, but it's awesome. All right, it's you control your men the same way you would in any other RTS. You can build bases like any other RTS, but it's a sandbox played out over however long you want it to, and you can get attached to your characters, and you can do whatever you want, but it's all played out like an RTS in some ways. And I know this isn't related at all to the competitive games side of this that I was talking about, but I just really wanted an excuse to bring up Kenshi. I'm kind of addicted right now, but it just shows that RTS can go in unique directions and still work. Okay, that's why I'm bringing it up. Not every game has to be StarCraft, and not every RTS that's not like StarCraft has to be bad. Now, if you're a person who plays StarCraft daily, has spent the hours to master the game, or otherwise some sort of high ranking player or pro, then StarCraft's formula and format are working as intended. All right, it's a game that was made to be played competitively, and that was basically the foundation of esports. It's an insane challenge to learn, but if you get good enough, it's massively rewarding. I'm not going to say anything stupid like asking to change StarCraft itself. I'm just asking that people making RTS going forwards from this point learn the right lesson from StarCraft and maybe consider the average player rather than making every game only for the pros. Now, and if you're making to make a game to dethrone StarCraft as the competitive RTS champion, then go ahead. Just keep that in mind and shoot for it. All right, there's nothing wrong with that style of RTS, with that way of making an RTS. I just feel like people only try to make that style of RTS, and when they don't, it just, I don't know, it doesn't work. You have cases like Minecraft Legends just falling on their face and dying. I tried to get some of my friends to play StarCraft 2 with me recently, and we actually got a decent group together for at least a few games. However, within a week, basically everybody had quit because they were just overwhelmed. I had some previous experience with RTS at the time. This was right before I started playing ranked. So I wasn't bad, but everyone who was new by comparison just never stood a chance. I played my friend at one point with like the 50% handicap on because I was trying to find some cope to play with them, and I completely demolished him, and that was just the last game we ever played together because we realized that we just couldn't play against each other. It just wouldn't work. And that kind of soured me on a lot of the I don't know, just on StarCraft in some ways, because it just felt like I couldn't, no matter how much I wanted to play the game with other people, I just couldn't. Online ranked was the only way I could ever get anything, because skill was too much of a decider and everything. Like if I'm playing a shooter and I'm fighting somebody who's also pretty strong, it's not, you know, that big of a prop. Like I could take a life off of some of the best players in the world if I just have a good opportunity, or I ambush them or whatever reason. In those kind of games, it's a much more even playing field, even regardless of skill. Skill gives you advantages, but it's not, you know, it's not the same. In StarCraft 2 and RTS in a wider sense, every minute detail of your gameplay is not only manual, but it has to be done very quickly if you want to win. You want information, so you send out a scout. Now that scout has to be controlled, and if you want it to stay alive, you have to make sure it does while you're also trying to build up your economy. So you start building another base. That base needs workers. You need to produce those and rally them over, but you also need to defend that base. So you start building better tech and production structures. Now your base is under attack and you're micromanaging a battle while also doing everything else I just mentioned at the same time. And if you can't do it fast enough, then one of those factors is just gonna get ignored and you're gonna fall behind. You forgot to upgrade units in tech. Your units are too weak. Now you lose. You upgraded to a good economy, but you didn't scout. The enemy has the perfect counter to you, or they have way more bases, and you lose again. And it's just, essentially, StarCraft is extremely stressful to play because of this, because there is nothing given to you. And that is one of its strengths. But it also means that there is zero chance for a worse player to beat a better player in almost any case. Like, yes, you could cheese. Yes, there's ways around it, but I'm just, on average, skill is the only thing that really matters in a game like StarCraft. And while that makes it very interesting on the wider scale, like as a professional game, for the casual player, I don't know, it kind of sucks. Like, the macro mechanic of economy and building bases and getting exponentially farther ahead than your opponent if they don't do those things, it just causes APM and like muscle memory to be king in RTS. And the result of that is that just casual players can't really succeed in the 1v1 that the game is known for without just getting thrown into those immense disparities of skill. And I know that ranks exist to even that out, but again, if you're playing friendly matches with friends, you can play pretty much any game, with friends in friendly matches. And even if you're better than them, you could still find some way to make it fun or to have some interesting interaction. But with StarCraft, you really can't. If you're that much better, you just can't play the game. Now, I feel like that macro APM requirement is kind of why I feel StarCraft and Beyond All Reason lose me as a less skilled player. I know it's a skill issue. I get it. But at the same time, not everyone's going to be that good. So, anyways, RTS will probably never be more popular or have nearly the player counts of MOBA because it's designed to be played by pros. And I feel like if the RTS genre wants to have a wider appeal, then I feel like RTS needs to acknowledge the lower skill majority who play the games because they're fun and they just want to move their little guys around. Now, this has been essentially an insanely roundabout way of saying that good long-form RTS campaigns are possible and actually really cool. Please stop ignoring campaign and throwing some garbage together in favor of making the next StarCraft when I think a strong campaign with an optional versus or co-op mode, hell, maybe even ranked, is a much more viable way to get players interested. Hell, StarCraft's campaign 2 was awesome. I replayed it all on Brutal recently and had a blast. But I feel like there was still a lot more they could do with it if they really committed to it more. Exploring RTS mechanics in an interesting narrative experience is something that I crave, but it's not something I've gotten much. And the closest thing I've played with that is Kenshi, and that doesn't even have a central narrative. Live service models and games catering purely to the competitive experience, it's fine. It works for some titles. I just feel like RTS is being artificially narrowed by the perception that it's only a competitive genre, when it can be so much more. And I don't know. I'm probably going to get ratioed by people pointing out perfect examples I don't know about of exactly what I'm saying. I mean, hell, if you know any games that fit the bill of this, just put it in the comments. I'd like to try them, or just share your own thoughts on this. I love RTS, and it makes me sad to see it relegated to the backwater of the gaming space. And I think that RTS is so much more of an interesting genre than MOBA is, but it gets a fraction of the interest. And I think that's just because RTS just loses the average casual player, and it just can't keep their interest. And I think, if we can actually manage to figure out a way to make that more viable, maybe, with better campaigns, maybe, I don't know. I mean, one thought I had was maybe doing something a little more on the Total War side of things, where it's kind of cool when both players start with even, resource cost armies or whatever, and you can build your own army before the game starts, and then it's just strategy, basically. At that point, you don't have the macro problems of, hey, I'm getting way farther ahead because of the economy, and I get that economy is all part of it, but I do like, especially, this is mostly just for playing with friends that I'm talking about, but when you just jump into a game, you both have even armies, and it's who can control it better and come up with a more interesting strategy and outmaneuver their opponents. And I think that's a really fun way to play these games. And it's just, with the macro mechanic kind of holding it back from being that, it makes friendly battles miserable unless you're all equally skilled. And again, there's nothing wrong with the high ranked stuff. It's just, that's my thoughts. Also, I ended up having to actually script this video because, my god, I tried to record this when I was playing StarCraft, and my god, respect to all the YouTube goats out there doing StarCraft content who can just yap about anything while just playing the game, because I have so many recordings now of just me at the enemy's nexus being like, wow, I still messed up the intro again. I need to restart the recording. Game's already over. So I just did some games on the PTR instead. Anyways, I think that's the gist of what I wanted to say. Thank you for stopping by.